for corrupt and, if you will, terrorism. And that's where we are today. The law very clearly says you cannot do what has effectively happened. And so now the question is, did they break the law? Some may say they didn't. Did they circumvent the law in a way in which there's $400 million worth of untraceable notes that can be turned into U.S. dollars, handed to Hamas in Gaza, handed to Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon, used to move terrorism or war efforts, destabilizing countries around the world? The answer is yes.
Well, that's a huge concern, particularly the fact that this money can be used to support Iran's agenda of supporting terrorist networks across the region. I want our viewers to hear this sound from Josh Earnest, who actually acknowledged that they could never prevent that money from preventing that money from going into their hands. Let's listen right now.
The president was quite forward-leaning in advance of the nuclear deal even being completed, in acknowledging that we know that Iran supports terrorism. We know that Iran supports Hezbollah and the Assad regime. And it certainly is possible that some of the money that Iran has is being used for those purposes too.
So there's an acknowledgement there that the money can actually be used to support these efforts. What's your reaction to that? The fact that they go into this deal fully, knowing that this is definitely a possibility and a probability that these funds are going to be used to support organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah.
What we have to look at as the foreign policy of this administration, which obviously Hillary Clinton helped create, and do we want 4 more or 8 more years of it? Or is it time for a change, and do we need to send a message at the presidential, at the Senate, and at the House level that we need to return to supporting our friends, including Israel and Egypt and Jordan? Or do we, in fact, continue a policy in which our friends don't trust us and clearly our enemies don't fear us?
Well, speaking about Israel, obviously, always remember the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu making a very big effort to try to show Americans and express it publicly before Congress about why this deal was not good for America and the rest of the world. The president, in his briefing the other day, he said that the communities like Israel acknowledge that this has been a game changer, saying, quote, the country that was most opposed to the deal. He actually is saying that Israel is backing this deal when, in fact, the Prime Minister today had to go on record and say, no, Mr. President, we still stand firm that we do not support this deal. And yet the president is out there saying that Israel is backing this deal now. What do you make of that?
Well, I not only think it's untrue, and unfortunately the president should be very careful about saying things about foreign countries when they're adamantly opposed to it, but I think it also begs a question that Congress has to deal with. When we go back for that fall, that 3 or 4 weeks in September, we're going to be looking at how much additional funding we're going to need to help our allies, including Israel, in that region as a result of these billions of dollars, the entire Iran deal, and these $400 million essentially doing a round trip from Tehran to terrorists in the region.
Is it your firm belief that the reason that the White House did not put this into a treaty, to draft a treaty that spelled this deal out, it was basically do an end run around Congress?
Well, there's no question, Uma, that this administration has both legally and sometimes in violation of the law circumvented Congress, and particularly the Senate in their role. I don't serve in the Senate, but I respect the fact that treaties are supposed to go through the Senate for confirmation. Very clearly, they tried to call it not that. What is going on between Iraq and Iran, Iraq and Iran, where Iran is using money to destabilize, if you will, Sunnis in Iraq. They're using money to bolster Bashar Assad, who only last week used chemical weapons again in Aleppo to kill his own people. All of that is being funded by a policy decision that the president really didn't have the authority to do. We had a lot of laws in place designed to limit Iran and to as long as they were a state sponsor of terror. He circumvented them, And that's one of the dangers in continuing that policy. We now have in Syria a situation in which we have two enemies. One, the government, which is a Shia Alawite government. The other, ISIS, that has been in no small part spawned by the effects of Iran's intervention. So how do we fix a country in which both sides are effectively state sponsors of terror?
No, that's the big question. That's the big question. I know that you guys are going to be looking at this very closely, and we really appreciate you joining us with your insights, and keep us posted, please.
Sure will. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Well, giving voters a third option,
That
Libertarian
was good,
nominee Gary Johnson moving up in the polls.